your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
Audio Jungle.
I want my mommy.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, with Mother's Day a couple days beyond us here, we thought it'd be a good opportunity to take a look at the mothers in horror films. And they have kind of a lengthy history going back to the Oedipal Norma Bates, Margaret White, Pamela Voorhees. There's quite a few mothers that play critical roles in some classic horror movies. We thought this would be a good opportunity to show a little appreciation to the bringers of life and the mothers in the world and the mothers in the world of horror. What's your thoughts on this category?
Well, mothers bring us into the world and they nurture us and teach us into society. And they're really like the staple of the nuclear family, which, makes for a really deeply layered psychological horror because it challenges our presumptions of what safety is, especially within our home and our loved ones. And so you can often play really good twists with these evil mother characters. Or sometimes it's the opposite, where they have the mother who saves everyone from the horror. So
yeah, we actually had tons of good examples in both directions. Some evil mothers and some heroic mothers that we could have drawn from. Category was again deeper than I expected when we started to get into it. And we've talked about in the past how a simple category that we tackle, we could end up with such diversity in the movies. And I think this week's another example of that. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. But some of these movies that we pick are often they have way more depth and meaning than when I originally go into them thinking. So it's always fun to just play with these different categories. Like a Mother's Day category isn't something I would typically think of when I'm picking a horror movie, but there's so many good examples and so many good stories to talk about. So I think we picked some really good ones.
Yeah, good deal. And again, honor and thank you to all the mothers out there.
Thanks, Mom.
We're going to start with Cujo, 1983, directed by Louis Teague. And this was kind of an interesting stretch. It was kind of a glut of Stephen King horror movies being put out by big studios. And in very short order, we saw Christine, Cujo, Firestarter, Dead Zone, Cat's Eye, all come out.
Yeah.
Creep Show, even if you want to throw that in there, all in about a 2-year stretch. And interestingly enough, one of Stephen King's favorites of all of those was Cujo, which kind of surprised me to some degree.
Did he say why it was one of his favorites?
He specifically mentioned the tense action, that it copied the book fairly closely, and the fantastic acting by Dee Wallace, what she brought to the role. But there are some interesting differences between the book and the movie that we'll talk about here as we go through.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting horror movie to me because it's not like a supernatural movie. It's not like a slasher. It has a very realistic tone, and I think it's actually really well acted and well made. And there's a lot of great tension that's brought into this movie.
And it was the first Stephen King foray, or at least published foray, where there is no supernatural element. And you're 100% right. There isn't even actually any evil in this movie.
Right.
It's just tense real life circumstances.
Yeah, it's not like a possessed dog, like that. There's nothing crazy about it. It's just a series of events that when you compact them all together, it's just this horrific situation to be in. And it's bad from every angle. Like Stephen King does a really good job of the family it just keeps getting worse for them, especially the father.
Yeah. Our movie starts with Cujo. He's a big, friendly Saint Bernard, and we open with him chasing a rabbit. And he sticks his head into a cave chasing this rabbit, and his loud barking, disturbs bats inside the cave, and he is bitten hard on the nose.
Yeah, it starts off, the movie is kind of whimsical when it starts off like a Steven Spielberg movie,
Yeah, it could be like, the movie where all the animals got to find their way home and it's a happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
Then we meet Tad. He's a little boy who is he's scared of the dark. He's scared of monsters in his closet. He's just a very timid, very weak, very boy that needs to be nurtured, it seems.
Yeah.
And his dad Vic and his mom Donna are constantly trying to reassure him and give him some comfort.
Yeah, they paint this picture of like this the middle America family, that they seem like they're like they're happy together. There's a lot of security. They're doing the best to raise the kid. The father seems like a really good guy, a good father. He's involved. Like they're not abusive or mean. Like this kid's just a little like 3-year-old or something, and they're trying to nurture him and just love him. And it's very what's the word that I'm looking for? Like wholesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very fair. The dad meets up with Joe Camber to do some auto repair work. He does work out of his barn, out of his house. And this is where he brings the family up and they first encounter the friendly Cujo. And Camber's boy tells him, Cujo wouldn't hurt a fly.
Yeah, the mother's real concerned. Like, don't go near that dog. You don't know who that dog. Like, you don't go up to a random dog, which is actually good advice. You shouldn't do that. Like, you wouldn't want your 3-year-old going up to a Saint Bernard.
Absolutely, yeah. We find out after that for all their wholesome family unit that Donna is actually having an affair with a local man, Steve Kemp, and she decides to break it off because she really does have a beautiful family and a good life and a lot to be happy about. Shame it took her so long to figure that out, but she breaks it off, and Steve doesn't take it very well. He can tell he's very used to getting his way. He's very aggressive.
Yep.
And this day, Vic happens to be driving by and sees Donna leaving his place and him following her. So there's some tension and question created within the family unit.
Yeah, and he does. He like bangs Ewing, turns around, and like they're gone, and like he's just really suspicious. Like, what is going on here? Like this guy like comes over to my house. We play tennis together. Like he's just kind of confused. But their relationship's kind of on the rocks. Like I think they're talking about like, hey, we don't talk as much as we used to. What's going on? Maybe we should have another child. He's trying to keep everything together. He's just working full time. He has this advertising job, and they're just trying to keep the family together.
And I do always love that old school ideal of issues in the marriage. Let's have another kid.
It's
just makes like the worst idea ever. But
that's the worst thing you could do, right?
You heard it for 50 years, through the middle part of the 1900s. That seemed to be the answer to everything. But Camber's wife, we go back to Joe Camber. His wife wins $5,000 in the lottery and buys him a new hydraulic lift for his shop. But it wants something for herself. She wants to go away for a week and visit her sister. And during that time, Camber has already figured out he's going to drink and hang out with his alcoholic neighbor, Gary.
Yep.
And I found myself wondering at this part, she looks like she's packing, like looking over her shoulder. Is she leaving for a week or is she just leaving?
I think he's abusive and she wants to get out of there, and she's trying to go stay with family and run and get out of there.
It doesn't say, but I got the same impression where, she's going away for a week, but she really is not coming back.
Yeah, that's exactly how it seems. She's very like timid, wants to just like leave. They paint him as like a grease ball type.
Yeah, for sure. So Steve, the spurned lover, shows up at Donna and Vic's home and tries to force himself on her, and she's kind of fighting him off, and they knock over a cup and spill some, cry over spilt milk.
Yeah.
And Tad and Vic come home right at that moment, and they see the broken cup and the spilt milk, and Steve leaves, but you can see on Vic's face he knows.
Right. Yeah. Because they're both arguing clearly and they both look disheveled, and he walks in like, why would you guys even be having an argument, and why are you in my house when I'm not here?
And he does something interesting. He just looks at her and says yes or no, and she looks it up from where she's cleaning up the broken dish, and after a minute she says yes. And for that simple phrase, it's just out in the open now.
Yep. Yeah, and he just leaves.
Well, he has to go out of town for a work crisis. As you said, he's an advertising executive, and something went wrong with their line of cereals that
It's giving people hemorrhage. People think they're like bleeding after eating it.
Yeah, and they show the commercial. It's this kid's cereal, and at the end, there's this guy looks in the bowl, kind of angles the bowl, and looks in creepily and says, "There's nothing bad here."
I actually thought that was really comical, like that they would make like the super big commercial giant like company, like, hey, there's nothing wrong here. We're just an innocent billion-dollar corporation selling you a product. Like it was pretty tongue in cheek.
Yeah, I thought so too. But something, it went wrong. The cereal's making people sick, and so he's got to go to a meeting out of town. So he leaves and he tells Donna she's having trouble with her car. Go ahead and take it to the Cambers. Back at the Cambers, the wife and the son leave on the trip, and Cujo is now rabid from the bite. We can see him slowly deteriorating through the first 40 minutes of the movie, and we can see he's not himself. And now he can, he's foaming, he's drooling, his eyes look a little off. He's going mad.
Yeah, he was kind of like John McClane in Die Hard. Like every scene, he's just bloodier and more torn up.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. We see him attack the neighbor, Gary, the alcoholic neighbor, and he kills him. And Camber comes over looking for his buddy, and he finds the body, and he tries to call the cops, but Cujo gets to him before he can, and he kills him too. And
there was a sort of blooper right there in that scene when he attacks his friend. Cujo's tail is wagging, so he's like, because he looks playful. And I was reading on it, and throughout all the scenes, what they were trying to do is take the Saint Bernard's tails and like kind of like tuck them in, like tie them down a little bit, so that their tails wouldn't be showing wagged on camera. But in that one scene, they forgot to do that, and so he looks very playful, and like you can see his tail wagging, and the guy's like, no, don't hurt me, but like you just see his tail wagging, and it was kind of like a little blooper they left in there, but it's funny.
I would have just said he is just so happy to be ripping your throat out. It's the great joy in Cujo's life at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I read they used 5 different Saint Bernards as well as a mechanical head to film this, and
they tried to keep him scary, but every time the boy would cry, the dog would get really concerned and run to the boy because they're just so perfectly well trained that they thought something was wrong, and they had to get the dogs. Like, no, it's hard to get like a dog to know that someone's acting.
As hard as it is to work with animals, I thought, the tail wagging aside, the animal scenes were legit. They looked good.
They were legit. Yeah,
they looked real. The trainers, they did a fantastic job.
That whole car scene, like I would rather have spiders and snakes on me than a 200-pound Saint Bernard, like pretending to, like, I don't know how they did it, but they looked good.
Yeah, I did. So Donna and Tad head to Cambers to get the car fixed, and the car is bucking and heaving, and it barely makes it there, basically dying in his driveway. And while Donna is trying to get Tad's seatbelt unhooked, Cujo attacks through the passenger window. This is back in the day when they just put kids in the front seat, no car seats or no restraints.
Yeah,
I remember those days. But right through the passenger window is the snarling, snapping, drooling, foaming Cujo head. And I'll tell you what's through all the attacks, Tad's screams are unnerving.
Yeah, it seems like he's genuinely terrified.
You really want him to shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one that thought that.
But you got the barking and the snapping and the growling and the mother in a panic, and his just shrill shrieking through the whole thing, and he's relentless with it. And I thought it really added to the tension, because you're like, oh my God, will somebody shut this kid up?
Yeah, it feels hysterical. That scene actually legitimately feels hysterical. It doesn't even feel like acting. And he's like gripping. He's in the back. He's gripping the note for the words to keep the monster away that his dad wrote. So here he is being attacked by a monster. His parents have always told him there's no monsters, and he's like, "You guys lied to me."
Yeah. Yeah, they finally fight him back and get the windows closed, but Tad keeps screaming. And yeah, metaphorically, it's the monster he's always feared.
Yeah.
And you just see the kid is unraveled.
Yeah.
So the car is dead, and Cujo just sits stalking them. He won't get too far away, and he's just looking at him. And there's scenes where he's just, his muzzle's got a little blood on it and drool, and he's just growling.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there growling. They're not moving or anything. It's just, the anger and the virus just working its way through him. And again, nothing supernatural. And Cujo's not evil. He's a victim of the rabid bite, and nothing he can do.
Yeah, it's something that happened to him, and which is interesting because there's kind of like there's almost like this parallel where like something happened to him that's monstrous, and then you also look at the family where it's like it's being broken apart. Like so, like there, like you have these like two, like you have two things that are happening. One thing's happening to the dog, and then there's other thing happening within the family, and like then there's this like kind of clash between them.
Yeah, lots coming unraveled at once.
Right,
sure.
right.
So they're stuck there. They end up there through the night. They end up there. There's one scene where there's some tension where the little boy's got to go pee, and she kind of opens the door and lets him pee out, but the door's just kind of cracked open, and you think something's going to happen, but Cujo's just watching. He doesn't do anything. But dawn comes, and the mother Donna wakes up with Cujo just staring at her straight through her window.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, like cinematography wise. Like it just like it slowly starts to pan, and then boom, his head is already there. It's just been sitting there. I thought that was really, really well done.
I agree.
Like it's not a jump. It's not a jump scare. There's no music. There's no loud sound, and you just see. And like she has this like look of like absolute fear. And I love that shot. I think it was really well done.
I think there's a base fear of someone watching you while you're sleeping, and you being completely helpless and out of control.
The paralysis demon.
And you wonder, like, how long has Cujo been just staring at me?
Yeah.
Just wanting to sink into my flesh.
Because it's not like he walks into the scene, like it pans and he's just dead still, like he's been staring. I thought that was one of my favorite scenes.
Agree. Good call. Vic from his business trip keeps calling home, but there's no answer. So he's starting to become concerned. The mom spots,
if he's not already, he's probably thinking, "Oh, great, she's
He's probably thinking she ran off with Steve. Is probably what he's thinking. But
right, and when he stays with his friend, like his friend says that he's like, "Oh, she's probably staying the night with a friend," and he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that."
Yeah, a friend, right? Quotations.
Yeah.
The mom spots a baseball bat in the yard, and she's thinking about trying for it. But as she starts to open the door, Cujo attacks the car, and now he's just ramming his own head into the passenger door repeatedly and hard. You can see the car shake and the door dents, and he's bloodying himself. And in what I thought was a really cool display of his power and force, he damages the door so much that the door handle is loose, and he bites it off.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, damn, this, he's not to be trifled with.
Yeah, he was huge. At one point when they show he's got his front legs on top of like on top of the car, and he's standing up on two legs. I had to stop. I had to like press pause and just look at how big of a dog this was. I mean, he was huge.
Yeah, like you said, I don't know but he looked to be like 200 pounds, like you said, big dog.
Yeah, and I used to have an Akita, 160 pounds, and he was massive. So I mean, I can't imagine how big 200 is.
Later, Tad falls asleep, and the mom decides to try for the bat. And she gets out of the door, and she's looking around, and she can't see him. And in another scene I thought was framed very well, she looks under the car to see if she can see him on the other side. And when she stands up, he's right behind her.
Yeah.
And he attacks, and he knocks her down, and he's on top of her, and he's teeth and claws just going like mad fury. and he bites her, and he mauls her, and he scratches her. She finally gets back into the car, but the door's open, and he is like 3/4 of his body's in on the seat, just mauling her. And it takes quite an effort for her to get him pushed off and get the door shut, but she does, and now she's bitten and she's bloody, and Tad is screaming again.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be that truly is a horrific thing when you think about it. Like of all the horror topics, like a rabid dog, a rabid 200-pound dog that has you trapped in a car, like you're dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no one to call. You know, I said to my wife when we were watching this, I said this movie is completely functionless in 2023 because of course she would have a cell phone with her.
Right. Well, or the cell phone would be dead, or she wouldn't have a signal.
Yeah, true. I think some of those gets a little old when the cell phone doesn't have a signal anymore, unless you're in the mountains or something like.
Well, not if you're with Verizon, Jerry, because I have Verizon. I never have a signal wherever I go.
Well, we're never going to get a sponsorship there now, but
yeah, I blew it.
Yeah, modern technology, if you go back, actually eliminates so many scenarios in classic horror movies.
Yeah,
well, really
like Home Alone, not even just like all kinds of movies.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
There's a text. There's a problem. There's a text. The end.
Vic still can't get a hold of anybody at home. So he cuts his trip short and he says he doesn't care. He's going home. Meanwhile, Steve visits the house looking for Donna, but when he can't find her, he decides to trash the house. You know, typical
psychopath.
Yeah, we meet him at the beginning and he's friends with the family and he seems like a nice guy, and we find out he's just not.
Yeah, they introduce him as like, you know, the silly uncle, you know. Hey, what's up, guys? Is there for breakfast?
Yeah, and he jokes about how Vic always, beats him at tennis so bad, and it's like, but he's just not a good guy. So he decides to trash the house. Yeah. Back at the car, Tad is now hyperventilating. They're worried about dehydration and heat stroke, imminent dangers for both of them, but especially Tad. And finally, Donna gets him back to breathing normal. But you can see this urgency is growing by the minute.
Yeah, and plus that whole scenario is going to give that kid PTSD. He's going to need therapy for years.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So Vic gets home and finds the place trashed, and he calls the cops. And he points them to Steve. And they track down Steve, and he admits he trashed the place, but claims he hasn't seen Donna and Tad. And meanwhile, one of the sheriffs goes out to the Cambers to check things out. And what I thought, you always point to like dumb moments in movies where people do something stupid, and he sees the car and he sees the blood and he grabs the radio as if to radio something in, and then something catches his eye and he gets out and checks on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if he just would have called it in like you should have.
Yeah, and not only that, he doesn't even prep his gun. Like he walks out. So when he does, like something's going on, and like he goes out there and like drops his gun once Cujo comes out. Like the whole thing is a fumble.
Yeah, he's like a Keystone Cop in how he handles this. Really.
Yep.
And Cujo attacks him, chases him into a barn where he tries to climb up and get away, but Cujo's relentless, knocks him down and kills him.
Yep.
At this point,
if you ever watch like videos of like animals on rabies, that's actually how they are. Like there's something happens to them where they become that relentless.
Yeah. And I thought this was presented in a very extreme but realistic way.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't become like where he could bite the car door off and rip the car in half, but he was very aggressive and you could tell single-minded in his focus to attack.
Yep.
At this point, Tad is delirious and dying. And Donna gets out of the car and gets the bat when he's distracted with the sheriff. And now Cujo's coming at her, and she's hitting him repeatedly in the head. But he keeps coming. And finally, she breaks the bat across his head, but he still is coming. And she's holding the bat, and he lunges on her, and his body's impaled on the splintered wood. and she kind of, lets him roll to the side, and she picks up the cop's gun. At this point, oddly enough, the passenger side of the car, the door handles was bit off by Cujo, and her side, when she got out, somehow locked. So she's locked out of the car with Tad dying inside. Finally, she uses the sheriff's gun to break the back window and carries Tad inside. She puts him on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
And she's using water from the sink, and she's cooling him with it, and she's trying to get him to drink some to hydrate him. And he doesn't seem to be responding. She does some CPR, and finally Tad starts breathing again. And just as he starts breathing again, Cujo crashes through the kitchen window right towards them both. And Donna picks up the sheriff's gun and shoots it.
Yep. Yeah, they don't show it. They don't even show it. They just show her firing the gun, and we just assume.
Yeah. Yeah, because the next thing, she's walking out of the house carrying Tad just as Vic arrives, and the family is reunited. And that's the end of the movie. And I thought Dee Wallace was very strong in the role of protective mother.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, was not a perfect character, as her infidelity caused issues, but as far as protecting her son, she went above and beyond, and she was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was an awesome role. She did a really good job, and it's a very complicated character. She has to do this. On one hand, she's doing something very bad, but then on the other hand, she's also like, it's a very dynamic role that she had to play. I thought she did it really well.
I did. I agree completely. As we said, Stephen King really liked the adaptation a lot. He still talks about it as one of his favorites. The ending was changed, and it's less dark than the book. In the book, Tad does not make it, but they thought that was a little too dark for the movie going public, and they changed it. And I'm okay with the change. It doesn't really change the fundamental story, other than
right.
It makes the end not so depressing.
Right. They often do that, and with from book to movie, they'll change things here and there anyway. So.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good movie. In this case, we got a mother being heroic and doing whatever she can to protect her son, which is an awesome message on, as we celebrate Mother's Day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our next film is very, very different. And this movie is called The Girl Next Door, from 2007, directed by Gregory Wilson. And it's based on the riveting Jack Ketchum book, which I read long before I even knew there was a movie.
It was 1989 it came out, right?
And it's based on the real life murders of Sylvia Likens. It's based on a true story, although, when they say based on, you're sure there's some creative embellishments. But
yes. Yeah.
I found this, and I love the book. I still have it. It's in my bookcase. I will tell you, this is a rare instance of, I thought the movie was more disturbing than the book, and the book's very disturbing. And when you picked this movie, I said, "Oh my God, I was hoping to never watch this movie again as long as I lived."
I thought you were kidding.
And I was not kidding.
Yeah, it's one of the darkest movies I've ever seen.
It is, and I have seen, if you do the list of the most disturbing and the most, I think I've seen all or most on all of those lists. I really have. I have sought out the most hardcore. This movie has almost no blood, and it bothers me more than any movie I can think of.
Yeah, it's not one or two lines. It's literally everything Ruth says. Like, everything she says is just demonstrative. Like, she is a monster.
Ruth is the most evil, vile, repulsive character that I can think of in the history of cinema, in my opinion.
Every single line, everything she says is to inflict these kids with nothing but torture, pain, and malevolence. Like, it's not, there's nothing good about her. She has no good intentions. It's one of the most evil characters I've ever seen.
Totally agree. And this movie in general, let me say, it's well done. It's well acted. It's well shot. If you are trying to invoke feelings from your viewers, it does a fantastic job.
Yep.
It is just so dark, so downbeat and depressing. There's not one uplifting moment of this entire movie.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be miserable, watch this movie and then think about it for the next 4 hours, because it's
that's
that
all
dark.
you'll do. You'll shut the TV off. Like, what did I just watch? Like,
Yeah.
You'll be scratching your head, bothered. Like, I need to talk to somebody. Like,
Yeah. It's crazy. But we'll walk through it here.
Yep.
The year is 1958, and Meg and her handicapped sister Susan move into a small town because of a horrible car accident that killed their parents. So they move in with their Aunt Ruth, and she has 3 sons, Willie, Ralphie, and Donnie. And David is the next door neighbor, and the story is basically told from his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He hits it off with Meg right away. And as we find out more about the neighborhood and about the scenario, Ruth is the woman who lets her boys and the neighborhood kids all hang out at her house, and she gives them beer and she gives them cigarettes, and she very commonly and openly talks about very adult things.
Yeah, and the way they do it, that first scene where she's sitting down with all the kids, she finishes saying all these messed up things to them, and then she goes, "All right, guys, all right, boys, finish up your beers." And I'm like, "Wait, what? They're sitting there drinking beers? Like, you know what I mean?" And then you see them chugging the beers, like, "Oh my god."
Yeah, and you're like, what is wrong with this woman?
It was a very interesting way to introduce, to show that they didn't show her handing them. They didn't. It was very, very subtle, and she just says, "All right, finish up your beers." And then I caught on. I was like, "Wait a second."
Yeah,
she's just allowing all this stuff. Yeah,
including her own sons, the youngest of which can't be more than 9.
Yeah.
But doesn't care. And she starts to mistreat Meg. We can see very quickly. She won't give her food. Meg has to ask Davy for some money to buy.
Her fat.
Yeah, tells her she's fat.
But she doesn't even the way she does it, right? Like this is what's so evil about the character. It's not like she goes like, "Meg, you're fat." Like what she does is like a very condescending, in a very condescending way. She's like, "Honey, you don't want to be fat, do you? You want to be a lady." You know, yeah. And she just does it in this evil way.
If you eat too much, Meg, boys are never going to want to be with you.
Yeah.
Like her just twisted perspective she brings to everything.
Yep.
We can see that for all her crazy faults, that Meg has really hit her crosshairs and is going to be the brunt of her punishment.
Yep.
Meg confides in David. He feeds her, and he encourages. She even said, "I used to paint, and I'm too depressed to do any of that." He encourages to start painting.
Yep.
It says, "You should really paint something for Ruth," thinking it will help the relationship.
Yep.
David doesn't understand the depth of how warped she is.
Right. He thinks, "Hey, just do something nice and open up the relationship, the dynamic between you guys. That's all you got to do." Yeah, he has no clue.
And she says, "No, you don't understand. She will ridicule me. It won't be good." So she paints a picture for Davy, and he takes it, and the next day he brings the painting to Ruth and says, "Hey, Meg made this for you." And he thinks he's trying to help.
Yeah.
But it blows up. And she says, she didn't make it for me. She made it for you. It's very clear. And wants to know what else Meg is giving you. And she goes into this tirade about sex and nastiness, again, in front of young kids. Yep. And she says that sluts deserve a thrashing.
Yeah, and she also does this like Barney TV show style way of every time she gives these speeches, she's like, "Gather round, children. I'm going to teach you something," and then it goes on this tirade of like saying evil stuff. It's just like, what?
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect. She gathers everybody around.
Yeah, with this soft voice,
educational moment, and then it's sick, twisted, adult themed, and you're like,
evil.
What the heck is wrong with this lady?
Yeah, they're all listening, like, okay, like.
The next day, the boys are tickling Meg, and Donnie, the youngest, grabs her breasts, and she slaps him off. And they immediately start yelling to their mother, Ruth. And Ruth interjects and says she's going to punish her by punishing her sister. So this is the younger sister, Susan, who has leg braces and walks with crutches. She pulls her pants down in front of, makes the boys watch. So she's bare ass right in front of the boys. And
doesn't she have one of the boys pull her like her pants down? Like, doesn't she make it even worse by having one of the boys do it?
She may,
or maybe that's later.
I think that's later in the basement, but she makes everybody watch, and she paddles her with a dirty toilet brush.
And then she tells her to stop crying. She's like, "Why are you crying? This isn't even like." Yeah, she's like, "Ladies don't cry." I was like, "Oh man!"
And you can see now she has two ways of punishing Meg, directly and through her sister. And Davy runs out because he can't stand it any longer. And this becomes a theme that's this is one of those movies where you want to jump into the screen and strangle everybody. Your frustration is just overwhelming. Davy leaves because he can't take it any longer, but he continues to hang out with the boys. He continues to like pretend like nothing's happening. And that, he's supposed to be the conscience of the movie. Mm-hmm. He's way too late to the party, and it's very frustrating.
It shows that he's afraid of the authority. He's afraid that Ruth is an adult and has the authority. He feels as powerless as they do. He feels like if he's there, he can help Meg. He doesn't know what to do. Like, I'm sure maybe in 1958 in that culture, it's like you didn't go tell your parents about another bad parent. I don't know. You know what I mean? But like, he just doesn't know what to do. He thinks maybe if I just hang around, I can help her.
Yeah.
It's still frustrating. I agree. Like, it's because you just want to tell him, like, go tell someone. Like,
yes. You can fix this.
Yeah. Go tell the authorities or something,
But he continues to hang out with the boys, pals around with them, good buddies. And the next day they see Meg talking to a police officer. And they go back home, and Willie, the oldest, slaps Meg across the face. And Ruth sends everyone to their rooms. And that night, Davy comes for a sleepover. It's just baffling to me. And Meg is tied up in the basement, hanging from a rafter by her arms, and she's balancing on a stack of books, which give her some relief from the pain in her arms. But the boys are pulling books out, making the stack shorter and shorter.
At this point, we're at pure torture. Now they're just actually purely torturing it physically.
And the three boys, Ruth's three boys, and you can say what's probably her fault as we see the kind of person she is, but they're enjoying it. They want to torture her. They want to do all kinds of awful things.
Oh, they've been indoctrinated for sure. Yeah,
and they're just going at her with their cruelty, and Ruth is encouraging it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the point where they strip her nude, and she cries to David, and they leave her there all night. Mm-hmm. And Davy sneaks and gives her a little slack in the ropes, but he still sleeps over. And I'm just pulling my hair out at this point. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I don't know how you could sleep at someone's house knowing someone's being locked up and tortured downstairs in the basement. I'd be like, I gotta go.
So now Ruth is punishing Susie for anything that she deems that Meg is doing wrong. And Davy tells Susan that he would make them stop if he could. And the next day, all the neighborhood kids are in the basement tormenting Meg. And I found this to be equal parts frustrating and a little bit unbelievable. Like, everybody in this neighborhood is cruel and sick and twisted, and they treat this like a game.
Yeah. They have those two girls that are friends with the oldest one, and they're all just kind of there. But even they kind of have this like look of worry, like, what's going on here? Like, they're kind of drinking soda, and they're just like,
yeah.
But yeah, it's weird. Yeah.
That night, Davy can't sleep. He's home at this point, and he tries to tell his mom. He waits till the middle of the night when all the adults are sleeping, and he tries to tell his mom, but she won't wake up, and she turns over, and he basically gives up. The next day, the boys are cutting her. She's still hanging in the basement, and now they're cutting her with their little knives. And Ruth decides, well, you can't leave it bleeding like that, and cauterizes her with her cigarette.
Yeah. And then tells her to stop crying or she'll do it again. I was like, geez.
And she's just screaming, from the pain and agony at this point. And at this point, a cop does come to the door, and Ruth lies and says the girls are out shopping, and the cop turns away, seemingly satisfied. The next day, Davy sneaks into the basement, and he gives her a knife, to Meg a knife so she can free herself, and tells her he'll leave money under a rock where they first met so she can get away.
Yep. And then they'll come back for the sister.
So he goes the next day thinking like, all right, let me check out the situation. And she's still there. And he walks in to Willie is raping her while everyone is watching, including the neighborhood kids.
Yeah. And the mom's just sitting there like on a chair, like she's sitting on a throne, just like smoking a cigarette, like this, just basically manipulating the whole situation.
Yes. Just so disgusting.
Yeah.
Davy tries to leave, but they won't let him. They grab him and they're like, no, you're staying here. And Ralphie, the middle boy, wants to rape her next, but Ruth won't allow it, saying, you don't want to be swimming around in your brother's seed. That's like incest.
Yeah. And then she says, don't talk to me, and turns away. I'm like, geez, she's ruthless.
It's very weird where she draws her line of morality, but the fact that
I don't think she has any. I think she likes being cruel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you want to do this? Well, now I'm not going to let you. And I'm going to call you gross while you're at it. You know what I mean? Like I think she just wants to be cruel to everybody.
She says, you're just like your dad.
Yeah. She's just being cruel. She actually doesn't care. Like, she just wants to, like, oh, you want some enjoyment? Tough shit. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, she's just going to be mean.
Well, she has her son rape his cousin, and then talks to the other son about it. You can't have incest. It's gross. Like, it just makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. It's just cruelty.
Donnie wants to cut her. This is the youngest, and of course he just wants to cut her, and Ruth agrees. So she heats up a hairpin, and she carves profanity on her stomach, and just burning and cutting it into her stomach. Says that so that no man will ever want her. And then she's just sitting there talking about sex and desires, and says, well, no man's ever going to want her, but Meg still may desire a man, so I guess I should probably fix that too. And then tells the kids about the spot of desire on a woman, and then heats up one of those blowtorches.
Yep. And
burns Meg's genitalia.
Deforms her. Yeah, deforms her.
Just blowtorches her genitalia. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And the worst screams yet, as you could probably imagine.
Yeah.
Davy tries to run again, but they catch him, and this time they tie him up as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Davy comes to, and Susan is down there, and she's holding Meg, and Meg is trash. She's cut up, she's burnt, she's abused,
she's dehydrated. Yeah, she can barely speak.
And you could tell she's near death.
Mm-hmm.
Susan tells him that Meg actually did escape, but got caught because she wouldn't leave without Susan. And then she also says that Ruth has been molesting Susan since they got there, so Meg wouldn't leave without her. So it's so awful.
It's twisted. Yeah, it's
Davey,
a nightmare.
It is an ongoing nightmare. Davy is smart enough. He starts a fire in the basement so that it's going to call attention to the house. And when Ruth comes down, he's hiding with one of Susan's crutches, and he hits her with it, knocking her out when she comes in.
Yeah, and then hits her a couple more times.
Yes. Always smart. I always hate in movies where somebody takes down a killer or a bad guy and then leaves it at that.
Right. No, you got to double tap.
Like, I'm going to empty this gun, or I'm going to beat till the stick break. I'm going to, because they're coming back.
Right.
So at this point, the boys run down and they tackle Davy, and they have a knife up to his throat, and they're about to cut him, but the cops burst in, and they take the boys away.
Yep. They probably saw there's when they light the fire, you can see all the smoke coming out of the house, like from the basement. And so you imagine that the cops drove by and saw all the smoke and like, hey, weren't we just there the other day? What's going on? And they probably ran in.
Yeah. And maybe they were, had questions about the suspicious behavior, but
right. Kind of
they're
patrolling.
there now, and they get the boys, they keep them from killing Davy. And the cops take out the kids, then they carry out Susan, and it's just Davy down there with Meg. And, she tells him, why she couldn't leave. And she thanks him for trying to help her. And she dies in his arms. And it's just gut wrenching what this girl went through, and then dies at the end. It's again, you just want to, it's maddening. You want to jump in there and take matters into your own hands.
I agree. Yeah. It's, first she loses her parents, which is a nightmare, and then she's thrown into a bigger nightmare, and the whole thing is just a downward spiral for her, and then she just dies at a young age. And like you said, it's a maddening movie to watch. It's an emotionally intense movie.
We go back to an adult Davy as kind of the wraparound story here, and he looks at the painting that Meg made for him all those years ago. And he goes back to the stream where they met, and you can see that basically the experience has tormented and weighed on him his entire life. And that's the conclusion to this maddening, depressing tale.
Yeah, it's one of, like we said in the beginning, it's one of the most evil characters that I think you could put in a movie. It wasn't just like one particular thing. It's every single line she says is evil.
And without cause. If you look at evil characters and you might, Hannibal Lecter's mad, but he eats the flesh of the people he kills. So his madness at least has a point, as twisted as it may be.
Right.
She has no point. And it's, again, we've talked about the horrors of humanity being the greatest horrors in the real world. And this is a perfect example of that. And I agree. She's the worst.
Yeah.
Evil,
and it's
vile, despicable.
And it's not just it's corrupting youth. It's corrupting innocent children. You're not doing this to other adults, or, it's, which is bad, but when it's like innocent youth of young kids that never even had a chance, they never even stood a chance. It makes it that much more kind of, heart-wrenching to watch. You're like, man, these kids they're doomed. Yeah.
And taking place in 1958, it made me think about something when I was rewatching this movie. Behind the closed doors, everyone talks about the good old days, and everyone knew everybody in their neighborhood, and you didn't have to lock your door at night, and the family unit was stronger, and people stayed together in marriages, and all that may be true and well and good. But if you read the history of those eras, behind those doors of that family unit, there's a lot of monstrosities, a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual assault, a lot of things that went unreported and unchecked because we didn't want to upset the apple cart. A lot of groups of people were marginalized and were not allowed to be free. I just think we romanticize the old days without lifting
the veil and looking at what was under all of that. I agree 100%. Yeah, there's a lot that and still goes on to this day, of stuff that comes, that comes from, within the household of the abuse, like you said. Freud said that most people's pathologies come from childhood trauma, and you see all of these stories of houses that seemed to be normal, but that there was an underbelly to it that was just really corrupt. And this is one of those perfect examples of that. The Shining there's a lot of allegory in The Shining to that. Like how abuse happens in a house and it seems like it's in isolation, Like you don't know what your neighbor's going through,
Right.
Because no one ever talks about it.
Right. You didn't talk about it. The abuse was ignored. The marriage continues. You pretended it didn't happen. Women make up stories about I walked into the doorknob. I fell out of bed. I slipped down the cellar stairs, and like you said, you said it perfectly. You lift the veil, and the good old days weren't always as pure as people would have you believe.
Right. Yeah. They're probably more awful than we think.
So Ruth is the antithesis of a good mother. She is teaching her kids nothing but evil, vile, despicable behavior, and someone who should not be celebrated on Mother's Day or any day. She is awful.
No, not at all. But this is a horror podcast, so
absolutely
right.
I think watching this movie, and what I wrote down is it's an incredible experience, but one I have no desire to ever duplicate.
Yeah. This isn't. It's. I probably won't watch it again. I've seen it, I think, 3 times now, so I think that's enough.
If you're too happy, if people say, "Man, you're just too happy today," okay, go watch this. It'll drag you down a few bars, but it's a well-made movie. There's
no unnecessary music. There's no jump scares. It's well made.
Yeah, it is. It's just the subject matter is just so bleak.
It's heavy. It's very heavy. Yeah.
All right. Well, this, and I want to congratulate you, Matt. This actually represents our completion of our 25th episode, which is kind of a cool milestone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to have been here with you for all of them.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I look forward to doing this continuously in the future. It's a blast. To
celebrate 25, we got something cool lined up for next week. We're going to do our top 20 remakes that don't suck. And I always like lists, and I always like, the controversy they can create, and people have different opinions. It's always fun to banter about what should or should not be on the list, but that's going to be exciting, I think. Yeah, you could spend half the time talking about things you should have had on the list that aren't on the list. Absolutely. Yeah, you can have like an honorable mention list to go on top of your list, but yeah, exactly. It's going to be good fun. Yeah, it will be. Yeah, so that concludes our episode on Mothers in Horror. We appreciate you listening. As always, this is the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That is Matt. Thank you to all the mothers out there, and thank you to all our listeners. We appreciate it. Thank you to all the mothers, and thank you, Jerry. And thank you, everyone else.
Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.